today, the Juneteenth event of our community. As we are familiar, it was on January 1st, 1863, that the Emancipation Proclamation was signed into existence by President Lincoln, making law the freedom of all slaves. The proclamation was well reported by news sources and by the faster and more enthusiastic grapevine sources, so that soon after the day in 1863, people whose freedoms had been generationally cut off had heard that emancipation was law, even if not reality for them. Which begs the question, when does such God-given freedom, previously repressed and oppressed for generations, start again? With the signing of a document? With the end of civil war and meetings at courthouses? Perhaps with the arrival and presence of Union officials in states long tied to the economy of slave labor? When does what began with God but is interrupted by human greed, prejudice, and immorality begin again? This confusion was present in many communities at that point in the southern states, including our own. May 21st, 1865. Throughout Scripture, there are messengers who bring good news. Some are human and some are angelic. We need messengers of good news, of justice, of liberation proclaimed, and righteousness flowing. On that day, such a messenger came to the Wachovia area. African Americans from the surrounding communities gathered in this very place, at these very pews, and listened as Reverend Clark, chaplain of the 10th Ohio Volunteer Cavalry, brought that message. The Salem Congregation Diaries of the Moravians said that the chaplain communicated to the gathering of African Americans, quote, that in virtue of the proclamation issued January 1st, 1863, they were to be free and no longer in bondage. Isn't that where it begins? At the formal local announcement. You know, the Moravians are actually a helpful study here on why the answer might not be as simple as that. Moravians, we seemed unlikely in the first place to entangle ourselves in the institution of slavery. I mean, even while owning slaves, we held to the belief that in Christ we all are equal. And Moravians around the world were criticizing the North Carolina Moravians as an embarrassment for owning human beings. And they truly thought, really did think of their brothers and sisters who were enslaved as brothers and sisters. But here's the entanglement. Eventually, some Moravians had the notion for the church to own some of their own St. Thomas slaves, the first foray into this institution. And around that same time in this country, Moravians traveled down from Pennsylvania and began a community on a large tract of land called Wachovia, where we all live now. They were committed to the model of a congregation town in which the ethics of the church guided the daily living of its members. They were proud of their hard work and enterprising ways, but they had come in small numbers from the north, and they needed some help in building this congregation town. So they rented enslaved persons who belonged to non-Moravians to help them complete projects. Apparently the Moravians were kinder than the slaves' other oppressors, and they would often ask Moravians to buy them so that they could stay here in town. Eventually the Moravians decided to do just that. Slavery came to Salem when the Moravian Church as an institution bought their first North Carolina slave. Going back to that May 21st, 1865 Salem Diary entry, the last three sentences are a curious weather report. Apparently that evening, 150 years ago today, a fearful storm came up with exceedingly vivid lightning, sweeping wind, and plenty of rain. The rain which fell today and yesterday, the diary keeps on, was very much needed, and all should feel truly thankful for it. though it put some to a little inconvenience at the time. A very telling weather report indeed. The righteous goals of equality, liberation, justice, and freedom are things that all should be truly thankful for. But when you build the community on generations of immoral and unjust events that benefit one party and hurt another, you're going to find that justice and righteousness are indeed an inconveniencing thing. To welcome the reigns of justice and freedom seems such an obvious thing, but where there are institutions and individuals who are more concerned with what they might lose in the waves of freedom and equality than what their brothers and sisters will gain, well, then freedom can wrongly be seen as an inconvenience. You see evidence of that when Lieutenant General Schofield, who was here in North Carolina on behalf of the Union immediately after the Civil War, said in that same month of May that freedom is all well and good, but these should not be voting citizens, for their votes will negatively impact the state and federal leadership.
Being a native of Winston-Salem, born and raised here, this means so much to me personally. My name is Terrance Hawkins. I'm an associate pastor at Winston-Salem First Church, and I just want to, for a few moments, connect some dots from the Emancipation Proclamation announcement that took place on this day to the current moment that we find ourselves in. Remembrance is a powerful gift. Like any other gift, if it is not stewarded well, it can become a curse. When the past is worshipped and elevated to God's status, it has an uncanny ability to hold the souls of men and women hostage and locked out from the now that God has for them. But when history is gazed upon through the lens of God's grace, it can catapult people into their futures with great wisdom, insight, and courage. There are untold blessings for the person who approaches the study of history with humility and honest and unflinching excavation of the darkest moments of history can bring to light many important truths for the present. The old saying is true: those who don't know their history are doomed to repeat it. Where community is to be formed, a common memory must be created. I want to read that again. Where community is to be formed, a common memory must be created. In other words, if we are truly to be a united people who understand the times that we live in, we must work, do the uncomfortable, the unsettling, the unhousing work of understanding our true history. Yes. And I believe that it's important for those who have metaphorically and literally sat on the front of the bus to take a metaphorical stroll to those who have sat literally and metaphorically on the back of the bus in society, and to learn theology and history from them. What do we learn when we hear history from the perspective of the margins? And when we learn history from the perspective of the margins, we are empowered for the now. But unfortunately, we have failed in our educational systems and in our churches to do that. Students are taught a very shallow version of Black history that goes something like this. Slaves came from Africa, not humans. Slavery was hard and cruel. Good old age freedom. Jim Crow segregation happened. Rosa wouldn't get off her butt. Martin Marsh had a dream and then got shot. But now, thank God Almighty, this country is free from its archaic bigotry. And I believe that this telling of history actually creates the atmosphere that's conducive for the widespread belief that we are in a post-racial and colorblind society. And over the last 7 years, we've been told to look no further than the White House that's occupied by a Black man. But due to recent events over the last couple of years, it seems that many are being awakened from the slumber of colorblindness, and many feel disoriented. What we thought of as our ever-so-distant past has been forcefully compressed into our present realities. There have been so many times, me personally, over the last couple of years, where I stopped and thought and said, am I in 1965 or 2015. And yes, we have made many great strides, but as one theologian puts it, perhaps the post-racial era is racism's afterlife. 80% of Freddie Gray's spine was severed and his voice box was crushed while in police custody. It's believed that this was the result of what's called a rough ride, where handcuffed prisoners are placed in a police van without a seatbelt and erratically driven through the town. As I mourned his death, my mind flashed back to what I believe was the original rough ride. The Middle Passage, the transatlantic sex slave trade, where black bodies were packed like cargo onto slave ships and forced to endure the treacherous journey from Africa to the Americas. And just like Freddie Gray, millions didn't survive this rough ride. As I witnessed the video of Walter Scott being shot down like a dog in North Charleston, I thought about my visits there. And how as I walked around in Charleston, in some mystical way, I could still smell the scent of slavery, and I could still hear the cries of the blood of black bodies that had been brutalized. As we watched Mike Brown's body in the heat of a summer day this past August, laying on the pavement for 4 long hours, I thought about lynchings where black bodies were hung as a spectacle, as hate-filled people got entertained by the horror. Ladies and gentlemen, I believe there is still a cross for us all to bear in this generation. We all still have a call to live what I call the Jesus way, where we love mercy and we do justice and we walk humbly before our God. Separate and unequal schooling still exists. The school-to-prison pipeline takes young men and young women who bear the image of God and says that they're disposable and says that it's more important to get money off of them being incarcerated than to educate them and allow them to flourish in life. Housing inequalities. So many issues still face us in the now. And as God's people, we are called to no longer sit on the sidelines, to no longer come like Nicodemus in the night and express our sympathy for black brothers and sisters, but to actually have a public, a vibrant, a real, consistent witness in our times. Empire could not snuff out the Lord of glory. He rose from death, and we must rise with his power in this hour to make him known.
In spite of the unrelenting brutalities of police misconduct and law enforcement's unlawful hands dripping with the blood of institutional racism and systemic black male extermination through the rightful cries of Black Lives Matter, they see evidence of black, brown, yellow, red, and white lives coming together for moral unity and solidarity with the audacity to believe that we can go forward together and not one step back. But I'm here to say, I'm angry. I'm angry on behalf of my ancestors who were brought here, kidnapped. They are forced immigrants, robbed from their roles as tribal leaders and kings and queens and governors to become second-class citizens in a strange land. Really? Let me tell you something about peace. There is no peace without truth. There is no peace without righteousness. There is no peace without love. There is no peace without morality. There is no peace without justice. This is like telling Jesus, we want peace, so don't talk about freeing the captives. We want peace, so don't tell the rich man to go to hell or take your wealth and distribute it amongst the poor. We want peace, so don't tell those who are blinded by ignorance and propaganda and lies that they need sight, because that might make the blind leaders of the blind angry. So we have a movement that's based on truth. We have people who are winning elections based on lies. We have people who are keeping power based on lies. We have people who are starting movements based on lies. So what we're here saying, if they can win off lies, we certainly ought to be able to win with truth. If they can so-called win on the wrong side of history, on the wrong side of God, we certainly ought to be able to win if we really believe that if God be for us, who can be against us? So we have the audacity to believe we will win. We will win. Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said it best. A threat to injustice, a threat to justice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. If you tolerate injustice, you don't know when it's going to come back to you and your child or your grandmother or your children. We cannot tolerate racism. And then I go to Gatewood and wait a minute. Because I had it up the hill with racism. I'm this tall, but up the hill. Okay? There you go, Gatewood. Now, wait a minute. You got black folk killing black folk. That's true. I'll give you that. But look at this. Don't get mixed up with a symptom versus a disease. We have a disease of oppression and racism that will create symptoms. If you push a black child out of school, set it up, take the job, ship him overseas, bring the guns, bring the drugs into his neighborhood with both and claims he does not possess, you are setting him up, ladies and gentlemen. Power invested in it and derived from the people, and is instituted solely for the good of the whole. It does not matter if you were elected by the Tea Party. If you took office, you are responsible for the whole body of North Carolina. Does not matter if billionaire, the Koch brothers supporting your election. You are responsible for the whole state of North Carolina. Does not matter if our Koch helped to pay for your election, or you're a part of ELEC, the American Legislative Exchange Council, and you guys have decided you're going to get funding from all the corporations in It does not matter. You are responsible for all of the citizens of North Carolina. So when they put their hands on this, and this is why I carry my Bible, to remind people what they're putting their hands on. Now, if a politician put his hands on the Bible in a Christian nation or a nation whose foundation is Christian, look, we're open for anyone whose religious beliefs are different. I don't challenge anyone's religious beliefs because God knows your heart. But if you're going to put your hand on the Bible, I think first of all you should know what's in it. And then if you don't know what's in it, ask us. Don't ask the people who got the White House Bibles. Don't ask them. Don't let them be the Christian people of America. Never mention justice. Never mention the poor. Never mention how the rich man was supposed to take his wealth. Now listen, remember this thing. When Jesus told the rich man to take your wealth and redistribute, this was a good rich man. Y'all remember he said, I've done the commandments ever since I was a child. So imagine what he would say to the rich man whose riches came from the backs of slaves. Whose riches came from Jim Crow and James Crow and James Crow Esquire. The ones who now use the computer to draw districts up that will allow them to win. Imagine if their wealth came from the jail or the prison industry through privatized prisons. He was talking to a rich man who said, I've been doing the right thing. Okay, all right, Jesus, okay, no problem. Take your wealth and go back and divide it amongst the poor. So we shouldn't be having this slavery problem. Should have never had it. We should have always been together, especially in a nation we claim to be a Christian nation. So I say to you, ladies and gentlemen, if you want to be a part of a movement that really believes what's in this Bible, really believes what's in the Constitution, really believes what our politicians that have been sworn to do, then we would say, join us. Be a part of us. Stand with us. Because we have the audacity to believe that we are on the right side of history. We are on the right side of the Constitution. We are on the right side of justice. We are on the right side of love.
However, I want to tell you this. I had hesitations about Moral Monday, about some of the movement pieces that are going on today, mainly because I don't like partisan politics. If something starts sniffing partisan, I get a little bit concerned and I just kind of pull all the way out. Some people call it anarchism, but whatever. But I pulled away because of that. And so I was sitting down for lunch with one of my mentors and heroes, Chet Myers. He said, why aren't you involved in that? And I said, well, I told him that. And he said, okay, that makes sense. All right. You know, I say you should get involved. Because I trust William Barber. I trust Dr. Barber. So I decided I need to learn more about Dr. Barber. I then started having the blessing of being the pastor at St. Phillips Moravian Church. And one of my church members said, are you involved in Moral Mondays? I support it. I trust St. Phillips, though. There's a book, or there's a concept that John Perkins talks about, Follow Me to Freedom. And so I want to say to you, get on board with this. Follow me to freedom. But I need to tell you, don't follow me because I know what I'm doing. But there are people I trust. So I trust Reverend Dr. Barber, and I trust his heart. And I trust St. Phillips Moravian Church. I trust its ability to ground me in a reconciling movement in the Moravian Church and in the city of Winston-Salem.
Thine eyes have seen the glory of